My name is Josh Johnson, and I buried my wife alone. I don't mean emotionally, I mean physically, literally, completely alone. No family, no friends, no familiar faces in the pews. Just me, a box, and the sound of cold church air settling in silence. No, one from my family came, not my mama, not my pops, not my older brother who used to steal cereal with me from corner stores, not the cousins who lived with us for whole summers. Not even my best friend, the one who cried with me on the day I got married, gone, vanished, silent. I stood there that morning in a black shirt that used to belong to a deacon from the church down the block. It was too tight across the shoulders. The collar pinched. The shoes were borrowed, and they rubbed blisters into the backs of both my heels before I even stepped into the sanctuary. My slacks were wrinkled from the plastic bag I stored them in, but they were the only ones I had left after the eviction. My wife's body lay in a plain wooden coffin. No polish, no trim, just wood. Raw, unvarnished, the kind the funeral home brings out for people who can't afford the options. The cheapest one, the one they store in the back. I asked if we could put a flower on it. Just one. They said I could, but only if I brought it myself. I didn't have time, or money, or anyone to ask. She died on a Wednesday around 3:40 in the afternoon. I wasn't there. I was on the line at the warehouse, stacking pallets of bottled water until my back screamed. The nurse called, but I had no reception back there. By the time I saw the missed call, she was already gone. I got to the hospital an hour later, still in my uniform, soaked through, dusty, reeking of cardboard and heat. I didn't say anything. I just stood over her and tried to remember the last thing I told her. I couldn't. My brain froze. We had been together 16 years, and now she was a body in a room. I remember the way her hand felt in mine, even after she passed. It was still warm. That detail haunts me, like part of her hadn't realized she was leaving yet, like she was still trying to stay. They kept her in the hospital morgue for 3 days. I needed time to figure out how to pay for the service. I called every program I could find. A caseworker gave me a number for a community burial fund. They offered to cover the basics. No frills, just a box, a plot, and a quick service with a volunteer pastor. I was grateful. I was ashamed. I kept imagining the look she'd give me if she could see how it all turned out. She used to joke about having a big send-off, bright colors, music, good food. She wanted people to laugh through tears. She said, "Don't let them cry too quiet. Make 'em remember me." I didn't even have a speaker to play her favorite song. I barely had gas money to get to the church. The sanctuary was empty. I sat down in the front pew and stared at the casket. I tried to picture her inside it, but my mind refused. It gave me flashes, her smile while braiding our daughter's hair, her laughter at some corny joke I made. Not this. Not her in a box alone, forgotten by everyone she once fed, helped, listened to, or forgave. The pastor spoke for 6 minutes. He mispronounced her name twice. He never met her. He read from a paper like he was reviewing someone else's homework. I nodded when he finished and waited for him to leave. I stayed seated for another hour. No phone buzzing, no cars pulling up. Just me and that casket, and the kind of silence that doesn't go away when you go home. Later, I helped 2 men from the funeral home carry her into the back of the van. One of them asked if I needed a ride to the cemetery. I said no. I rode the bus with my last few dollars. The whole time I held a folded paper in my hands with the burial lot number. I didn't cry, I didn't blink. I just stared at the ink. At the gravesite there were no words, no prayers, no flowers. The workers asked if I wanted to say anything before they lowered her. I shook my head. Because what could I say? That she gave everything for a family that barely showed up. That she held this household together with burned rice and gospel music and quiet, unwavering strength. That I failed her in ways I'll never forgive myself for. That I wasn't enough. I watched the casket go down and felt the cold rise up through my shoes. I told myself to breathe, just breathe, that I would be okay, but the truth is I wasn't. I still ain't. I walked home from the bus stop that night with the sky threatening rain. Nobody texted, nobody called, nobody asked how it went. And when I got home, my youngest son was asleep on the couch, curled up in the hoodie that still smelled like her. I kissed his forehead and stood in the doorway of our room, staring at the bed we once shared. That's when I realized the funeral wasn't just for her, it was for me too. A reminder that in this world, people like us don't get to leave legacies. We vanish. But I made a promise that night, quiet, small, nothing heroic, that even if nobody else saw her, I did. Even if no one remembered her, I would. Even if no one mourned her, I still would. Because love, real love, don't stop just because the casket closes. And grief, real grief, don't need an audience. It just needs a heart strong enough to carry it in silence. When I met Malia, I didn't even have a bed to call mine. I was staying in the back room of my cousin's apartment. The kind of place where you sleep with one eye open and keep your shoes by the door just in case. There was a mattress on the floor, springs poking through, and a window with no glass, only a plastic bag taped up to block the cold. I didn't have much. A couple pairs of jeans, 2 shirts, and a hoodie that used to belong to my older brother before he left the city for good. I was 23. Jobless, broke, and already tired in a way most people don't understand until they're 50. I met her at a laundromat, not some love-at-first-sight kind of thing. Just 2 people stuck in the spin cycle of life, folding clothes that smelled like detergent and struggle. She was sitting on one of those cracked plastic chairs, flipping through a magazine, waiting on her dryer. I was pulling a busted zipper out of a pillowcase. She looked tired too. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that sets into your bones after too many years of doing everything alone. We didn't speak. Not that day. Not the next either. It took weeks before we even nodded at each other, but something about her presence made the place feel less cold, less empty. Like maybe I wasn't the only one trying to hold it all together with broken pieces. Eventually we crossed paths at the corner store, and then again outside the bus stop. And little by little, we started talking about small things first. What buses were late, how the machines in the laundromat always ate quarters, how the price of milk kept going up, and nobody said anything. We laughed once, and that was it. It was never dramatic, never flashy, just slow and quiet and steady. Like rain on concrete, we built something that looked like peace, even if it was wrapped in chaos. At the time I was doing day labor, carrying drywall, hauling bags of cement, pushing wheelbarrows full of broken bricks across muddy lots. Every night I came home, with my hands busted open and my legs cramping. Malia was working part-time at a daycare, babysitting kids that screamed too loud and cried too long. She'd come home with glitter in her hair and food stains on her shirt. We both came from homes that didn't teach us how to love, only how to survive. So we loved the only way we knew how, by showing up, by staying, by sharing the little we had. She moved in with me after 6 months. We didn't talk about it. One day she just brought her bag over and never left. We used to sleep with the fan on even in winter to block out the sirens. We used to keep a pot of rice on the stove at all times, cheap, filling, always enough. For 2. There were nights we ate crackers and shared the last juice box in the fridge, but somehow we felt rich, because back then nobody expected anything from us. No one was looking. No one was counting. And when you're invisible, love can grow quiet and undisturbed, like weeds in a back alley. I remember the first time I saw her cry, not over some big moment, just a Tuesday. We were sitting on the steps outside our apartment, and she started crying into her hands. I didn't ask why. I just put my arm around her. Later, she told me it was because she felt safe for the first time in her life. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't. We weren't planning to have kids. But then came our daughter. Then our second. Then our son. And every time the weight got heavier. The bills stacked up, the hours got longer, the moments of peace became fewer and farther between. But we held on. We held tight. She would braid our daughter's hair in the early morning before work, sitting on an upside-down laundry basket. She'd pack little baggies of snacks with handwritten notes, even if we couldn't afford much more than dry cereal and tap water. She never complained, at least not out loud. And I did what I knew. I worked. I took every shift, every extra job. I picked up cans on weekends with the kids in tow just to afford a pair of shoes that wouldn't fall apart in the rain. But the more I worked, the more I disappeared. There were weeks where I didn't sit down to dinner once, months where I forgot the sound of her laugh, and still she stayed. Sometimes I think she loved me more than I deserved. I remember one night I came home to find her asleep on the couch, arms crossed, TV still playing a rerun of some reality show. I stood there for 10 minutes just looking at her. She looked so tired, not weak and tired, like someone who'd been carrying the world too long, but still refused to set it down. I bent down and kissed her forehead. She didn't even stir. That was the woman I buried, and that's why it broke me when no one showed up. They didn't know the Malia I knew. They didn't see her at midnight washing the same school uniforms, over and over. They didn't see her skipping meals to make sure the kids had enough. They didn't hear her praying under her breath at night, asking God for just one more week of strength. They didn't know how hard she fought to make something, out of nothing. But I did. I saw all of it, and I loved her for it, every worn-out second. There's a kind of math they don't teach in school, the kind where no matter how hard you try, the answer is always short, always off, always missing just enough to hurt. That's the math I lived by. That's the math Malia died by. Every month we ran the numbers: rent, groceries, diapers, bus, fare, electric, gas, phone bill, prescriptions, school clothes, and every month they betrayed us. The totals didn't care how tired we were. They didn't care how long I worked or how carefully she planned. They didn't care that we skipped meals, stretched leftovers, reused the same paper towels as napkins. The numbers just stared back at us with a kind of cold certainty. And that certainty was always this: it would never be enough. We had 3 kids and no savings, no credit, no safety net. The car had a cracked windshield and 2 bad tires. The apartment leaked. The heat barely worked in winter. The neighbors fought loud. The roaches came in through the walls. And still we made it a home. Malia hung up pictures with dollar store frames. She taped up the kids' drawings like they were masterpieces. She used candles when the power went out. She'd say, "At least it smells nice," and I'd nod, pretending I believed it too. But behind the smiles and duct-taped peace there was always pressure, constant, unrelenting pressure. Like trying to hold your breath underwater while pretending you're fine on the surface. At one point, I was working 2 jobs: warehouse at night, loading trucks until 3 a.m., then a security gig on weekends, standing for 12 hours in a parking lot where nobody parked. Some days I went 30 hours without real sleep, just caffeine, adrenaline, and guilt. Guilt because I wasn't around. Guilt because Malia was doing everything: the cooking, the cleaning, the kids' homework, the appointments, the discipline. She was raising a family with one hand while holding herself together with the other. And I was barely there. I told myself I was providing. That all the hours, all the fatigue, all the missed dinners and forgotten birthdays, it was all for them. But kids don't measure love in paychecks, and wives don't measure partnership in overtime, and none of it paid off the way I thought it would. There was a stretch in about 4 months where things got real dark. Malia had a cough that wouldn't go away. She'd get dizzy standing up. I told her to go to the clinic, but she kept brushing it off. Said we couldn't afford it. Said she didn't want to hear more bad news. Said she just needed rest. I should have made her go. I should have taken a day off. But I didn't. Because the rent was already late. Because the car needed a new battery. Because the fridge was almost empty and the shoes were falling apart. Because I thought we had time. I think about that a lot now. How much I assumed we had more time. We always think we have time until we don't. That winter was brutal. 1 space heater for 5 people. Layers of blankets. Kids coughing in their sleep. Me waking up with my jaw clenched so tight I could barely speak. Malia kept everything moving like a machine. She'd pack lunches with the last slices of bread. She'd wash laundry in the tub when we couldn't afford the laundromat. She never asked for thanks, she just did it. And I just kept chasing numbers that never added up. 1 paycheck to cover 2 bills, 1 day off to fix 5 problems, 1 man to carry the weight of a whole life. Some nights I'd stand in the kitchen after everyone was asleep, staring at the bills, spread out across the table. The silence felt like it was judging me. I'd punch the numbers into a calculator, delete them, try again. Looking for some magic equation I'd missed. Some way to flip a $230 paycheck into $800 worth of needs. It never worked, and slowly, that pressure seeped into everything. I spoke into how I slept, into how I loved her. I became a man who measured everything in loss. How much time I lost, how much energy, how much closeness. And Malia, she became the one holding us both together. Even while her own body was unraveling, she didn't complain. Not even when she was clearly in pain. She just moved slower, sat down more, slept deeper. I remember one night she dropped a plate and just stared at it on the floor, didn't pick it up, just stared. That's when I knew something was wrong, but I still didn't act, because I was scared and tired, and because that's how life works when you're poor. You normalize suffering until it kills you. There's no space for panic, no room for emergencies. You just keep going until you can't. The morning she collapsed in the kitchen, everything stopped. I was off work for once. She had just made oatmeal. The kids were in the back watching cartoons. I walked in to find her on the floor, eyes half open, breathing shallow. I froze. Then I called the ambulance with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The medics came. The neighbors peeked through their windows. The kids cried. I rode in the back of that ambulance holding her hand, whispering nonsense like it's gonna be okay, even though I knew it wasn't. At the hospital they ran tests. Hooked her up to machines, tubes, wires, beeping monitors. I sat in a cold plastic chair while a doctor told me words I didn't understand. Something about infection, fluid in her lungs, advanced pneumonia. I nodded like I understood, like I had any say in what came next. They admitted her to ICU, and just like that she was no longer in our home, she was in theirs, and I still had to go to work, still had bills to pay, still had kids to feed. So I split myself in half. One piece, at her bedside when I could, the other dragging itself through shifts that felt like punishment. I kept thinking, the numbers don't work. They never worked. I was always broke. But now I was broken, and deep down I knew this was the kind of math you can't fix with overtime. I used to believe that showing up was enough, that if I kept the lights on, kept food in the fridge, even if barely, kept the roof patched, and the kids dressed, I was doing what a man's supposed to do. I thought that if I worked hard enough, stayed loyal, didn't quit, didn't run, then I was fulfilling my part of the deal. I didn't grow up with a real blueprint for being a father, or a husband, or even just a stable man. Most of the men I knew either disappeared or hardened into something that didn't feel human. So I told myself that staying in the picture, no matter how blurred, was its own kind of success. But standing at the edge of her hospital bed, watching her chest rise and fall with the help of a machine, I started to understand the real weight of the things I'd failed to do. Not just the big dramatic things, but the soft ones, the quiet things, the invisible promises we make to the people we love, just by looking them in the eyes and saying, I got you. I realized that maybe I had stayed, but I hadn't really been there. Not the way she needed, not the way I thought I had. There were promises I made to her without saying a word. Promises I broke piece by piece, day after day, without even noticing. Like the nights I came home too tired to ask how her day was. The times I looked past her exhaustion, because mine felt heavier. The way I let silence stretch between us like a wall, thinking she'd understand that I was just handling business. I thought she'd always be there on the other side, waiting. I thought love was tough enough to survive long stretches of neglect. I didn't realize that love starves quietly, that it dies slowly in dim rooms where no one is really listening anymore. I had promised her rest. Back when we were still dreaming together, I used to say, one day you won't have to worry about anything. I meant it every time. I imagined a little house outside the city with a small porch, maybe a garden, the kind of place where the kids could run barefoot and she could sit without 1,000 things pulling at her attention. I told her I'd get her out, that I'd work until the wheels fell off just to see her safe, peaceful, free. But the wheels did fall off, and I never got her out. She died in the same chaos I swore I'd rescue her from, surrounded by noise, debt, fluorescent lights, unanswered prayers, and unfinished dreams. Even now, I think about how she must have felt in those final days. Her body shutting down, machines breathing for her, no familiar walls, no family surrounding her, just me, coming and going like a ghost, eyes sunken, voice cracking, promising her she'd get better. I lied to her, not on purpose, not out of cruelty, but I still lied. I told her it was going to be okay when deep down I had already started to mourn. I told her to rest, to let the doctors handle it, but I knew rest wouldn't bring her back. I watched the nurses adjust her IVs, heard the whispers between shifts, saw the looks that said more than words ever could, and I still kept pretending. Promised her I'd be strong, that I'd hold it down no matter what. But the truth is I cracked, not all at once, more like slowly, over weeks, like a wall with too many leaks. I started snapping at the kids, missing shifts, waking up soaked, in sweat from dreams where she was calling my name, and I couldn't move fast enough to reach her. I'd sit in the bathroom with the faucet running so they wouldn't hear me cry. I stopped answering calls, stopped talking to people who used to matter. I built this silence around myself like armor, but it never protected me. It just made the weight heavier. Because grief doesn't sit quietly, it spills over. Into your hands, into your voice, into the faces of the people still counting on you to keep going. And still the world didn't stop. The bills came, the fridge emptied, the kids still needed rides, food, help with homework. I remember sitting in the car outside the hospital one night, watching the traffic lights cycle over and over, thinking, I'm not ready for this. I don't know how to be both mother and father. I don't know how to carry all of this and still be soft for them, still be strong for them, still be enough. The thought that scared me most wasn't losing her. It was that I might lose myself after she was gone, and they'd be left with a shell of a man, barely breathing, just going through the motions. I made her one last promise the night before. They took her off life support. I sat next to her and held her hand. Her fingers were cold but not lifeless. I told her I'd protect the kids, that I'd keep the house going, no matter what, that I'd make sure they remembered her not as someone who faded in a hospital bed, but as the woman who made every impossible day possible. I said all the right things, the things you're supposed to say when the end is near. But the moment they shut off the machines, I felt all of it leave me. My strength, my plans, my belief in a future, gone, like breath from a mouth. People talk about closure like it's something you get, like it arrives in a moment, a conversation, a funeral, a prayer. But for me, closure never came. I buried her with those promises still pulsing in my chest, and now every day I wake up and try to keep them. Not because I know how, not because I believe I'll succeed, but because not trying feels like losing her all over again. There are things I'll never be able to give her now, the house, the peace, the rest. I carry that failure like a scar beneath my skin, but I still make breakfast every morning. I still brush our daughter's hair the way Malia used to. I still whisper her name when the silence gets too loud. And maybe that's its own kind of promise. Maybe that's all I have left. Maybe that's what love looks like after the world forgets. The morning started like every other one had that week. Grey sky, dry throat, phone alarm buzzing too loud in the dark. I sat up on the edge of the mattress, feet on cold floor, palms pressed to my eyes, heart beating out of sync with reality. The kids were still asleep, all curled up in the room we'd once shared, her scent still barely clinging to the pillows, like it hadn't decided yet if it was ready to leave. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last morning I'd live in a world where Malia existed somewhere, still fighting, still holding on. By then, her body had stopped responding. The nurse said the machines were doing everything. Her lungs didn't move on their own anymore. Her heart rate would drop and spike like it didn't know what it wanted. They told me she was comfortable. That word made me sick. Comfortable isn't a bed surrounded by wires and alarms and strangers. Comfortable isn't needing tubes just to stay in the fight. They said her brain activity had slowed, that if she did wake up, she wouldn't be the same, that her body was tired, that letting go might be kinder. I didn't want to be the one to decide, but I was. No one else stepped forward. No one else even showed up. They handed me the papers, printed out in black and white, with medical terms I didn't fully understand. There was a checkbox for every step. Ventilator removal, comfort medication, next of kin acknowledgement. I stared at them for what felt like hours. My hands were trembling, knees bouncing, throat burning from the pressure I kept swallowing. I asked the nurse if I could have a little more time. She nodded. Her eyes looked like she'd seen this too, many times before. I went in and sat beside her. The room was humming with low beeps and the faint hiss of the oxygen machine. Her face looked thinner. Her skin was pale, not in a sick way, more like distant, like she was already somewhere else, just waiting for her body to catch up. Her hair was tucked under a cloth cap, but I could still see the edges curling at her temples, the little bits that always refused to stay down. I reached out and held her hand. It didn't grip mine back. I wanted to tell her something. Something big, something final, something worthy of 16 years of struggle, joy, chaos, laughter, pain, survival. But all I could do was whisper the same word over and over. Please, please. Wake up. Please stay. Please don't leave me like this. Please don't make me live without you. Please don't make me be the one who tells the kids. I didn't get a sign, not even a twitch. No movie moment, no final breath where she squeezed my hand and looked into my eyes. She just stayed still, peaceful, distant. Around noon, I signed the papers. My hand shook so bad I had to hold the pen with both. The doctor came in, quiet and clean and cold. They shut off the machines like someone flipping a breaker in a forgotten basement. The room got eerily silent, like even the air didn't want to move too much. And then, she was gone. No dramatic shift, no final gasp, just a slow, invisible line between alive and not. 1 second she was part of this world, and the next she wasn't. I kept waiting for something to hit me, for the tears to come pouring, or the scream in my throat to break loose. But it didn't happen like that. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even sharp. It was like being hollowed out from the inside, like someone reached into my chest and scooped out everything that made me me, then left me standing there like a shell. Don't remember the rest of that day clearly. I remember the nurse trying to talk to me. Her lips were moving, but her words felt like a different language. I nodded without knowing what she was saying. I remember the elevator ride down. How slow it felt, how heavy the air was. I remember stepping outside into the hospital parking lot and realizing the sun had come out, bright and warm. That felt like a betrayal. The world had no right to shine like that. Not today. I walked home. I don't know why. I could have taken the bus, but my body just started moving and I let it. Step after step, block after block, through neighborhoods where people were mowing lawns, talking on porches, living. Just living. Like nothing had happened. Like someone's entire world hadn't just ended upstairs in a hospital room. I stopped at a corner store to get milk for the kids. The cashier asked how I was. I said, fine. That word cut me like glass. I paid, walked outside, and almost dropped the bag because my hands were shaking again. I sat down on the curb and stared at my reflection in the glass of a parked car. I didn't recognize myself. My eyes looked hollow. My skin looked older. My face looked like it had forgotten how to be someone's husband. When I got home, the kids were at the neighbors. I had texted earlier, asked if she could watch them. For a while. I didn't go pick them up right away. I needed a minute, just one. I sat on the couch in the exact spot where Malia used to curl up with a blanket and call it her little corner. It still smelled like her, faintly, coconut oil, laundry, detergent, life. That's when the sobbing came. It didn't creep in slowly. It crashed, a wave that flattened me. I bent over, face in my hands, making sounds I didn't know I was capable of. I don't know how long it lasted. It wasn't just grief. It was rage, guilt, regret, terror, 100 feelings all trying to rip their way out at once. I wasn't crying like a man. I was crying like a child who just wanted someone to say it wasn't real, that it was a dream, that she'd walk through the door any second and tell me to stop being dramatic. But she didn't walk through the door. She never would again. Eventually I pulled myself together, barely, wiped my face with the edge of my sleeve, still damp from the tears I didn't even feel fall, took a deep breath that didn't do a thing except make my chest feel tighter. I stood up like my body didn't want to, like gravity was asking me to stay in that spot a little longer, to disappear into the couch where she used to sit. But the kids were waiting. They didn't know what had happened. They were probably asking for her, probably hungry, probably wondering why I'd been gone so long. I had no answers, just obligations. I walked to the neighbor's house with slow steps, dragging the weight of what I had to say behind me like a chain. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask anything. Just looked at me with soft, quiet eyes and called the kids. I heard their little feet scrambling across the floor, heard the sound of their joy when they saw me, a sound that used to lift me, but now felt like pressure on a bruise. My daughter was the first to run up. She hugged my leg and looked up, searching my face like she could read the truth before I said it. My son stayed back a little, watching, chewing on the inside of his cheek like he did when he was nervous. I crouched down to their level. I didn't have a speech, no script. No soft way to explain what just happened in that hospital room. They asked if Mom was coming home. I opened my mouth, but the words got stuck behind a wall of shame and sorrow. I swallowed, tried again, and said no. Just one syllable. No. My daughter's eyes went wide, lips trembling, her whole body suddenly small and still. She didn't cry, not right away, just blinked hard as if waiting for me to take it back. My son asked if she went to heaven. I nodded. I said yes. It was the only word I could find, and even that one didn't feel like mine. It felt borrowed. We walked back home in silence. No small talk, no questions. Just the sound of the gravel under our shoes and the weight of a family shrinking mid-step. I held their hands, one on each side, and they didn't let go. The apartment was quiet when we walked in. Too quiet. She wasn't there to ask about their day. No rice on the stove. No gospel humming from the bathroom, just air. And the space where she used to be. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, arms folded across my chest, like I was trying to hold myself together. I replayed every moment of the last few months, not the loud ones, but the quiet ones, the small choices, the silences, the missed signs, the nights I came home too tired to talk, the cough I said I'd ask about tomorrow, the pills she stopped taking because they made her dizzy and I didn't push her to go back, the way she winced when she bent over, and I just assumed it would pass, the way she sat in the dark a little too long after the kids went to bed, the way her voice got softer, how her smile got shorter. I saw it all now, every detail, every ignored warning, every moment I looked past because I was busy trying to survive. And in all of it, one thought kept coming back. I failed her. Not in some loud, cinematic way, not in the way people point fingers and assign blame, but in the small ways, the ways no one sees, the ways that matter. I failed to protect her peace, failed to ease her load, failed to remind her, with consistency, with presence, that she wasn't in this alone. I thought I could make up for all of it with hard work, that if I just worked enough hours, paid enough bills, kept the lights on and the fridge stocked, it would balance out, that it would count. But it doesn't work that way. I thought she'd bounce back like she always did, thought she'd get through this the way she got through everything, but love doesn't make you invincible. It doesn't protect against the kind of wear life puts on a person when they've been running on empty for too long. Because love doesn't keep people alive. Love doesn't undo neglect. Love doesn't rewrite numbers. Love doesn't stop lungs from filling with fluid. Love doesn't fix a system that only cares if you can pay. That night I broke, not like a crash, more like a slow unraveling. Like a thread pulled loose from the inside, and everything just coming undone. The kind of broken that doesn't show in your voice or your posture. The kind that lives behind your eyes, tucked just beneath the surface, like a second heartbeat that never slows down. And I stayed broken, but I still had mouths to feed, still had backpacks to pack and cereal to pour, still had small hands reaching for mine in the dark, still had bedtime stories to tell, even when my throat tightened every time I tried to read her favorite lines. I kept going. Not because I healed, not because I believed things would get better. I kept going because I didn't have the luxury to collapse, and maybe that's the cruelest part of it all. Not the loss, not the guilt, not even the silence, but the fact that life doesn't pause when your heart stops working. It just keeps going, cold, fast, unapologetic,